Hey cinéfilos, ¿cómo están? El día de hoy les voy a hablar sobre los cómics que inspiraron a la película de The Batman, protagonizada por Robert Pattison y dirigida por Matt Reeves. Quédate aquí porque yo soy Naughty Geek.
Police! Hands up! Stay still!
En una entrevista se le preguntó al director Matt Reeves qué cómics inspiraron a la película de The Batman, y él mencionó que estos cómics son Batman Year One, Batman de los Halloween y Batman Ego. Comenzamos con Batman Year One, los inicios de la carrera de Bruce Wayne como Batman y Jen Gordon en el departamento de policía de Gotham City. La vida de estos dos hombres se entrelaza cuando descubren que son aliados en contra de los poderes corruptos en Gotham City. Este cómic está adaptado por Frank Miller, Bob Kane y Tad Murphy.
I got you! I got you!
El segundo cómic se titula Batman de los Halloween. Una brutal serie de asesinatos infunde un miedo en la ciudad de Gotham. Batman se propone encontrar al asesino en serie con el apoyo del oficial de policía James Gordon y el fiscal del distrito Herbert Dent.
When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning.
El tercer cómic es titulado Batman Ego. Es una novela gráfica que fue escrita en el 2000 y que explora el trauma que Bruce Wayne experimentó cuando era niño y cómo sería si ese trauma fracturara la mente de Bruce.
This is about a king, and Riddler's the match.
I can take care of myself.
Estos cómics son muy importantes para la inspiración de la película de Batman, dirigida por Matt Reeves y protagonizada por Robert Pattinson. Ahora vamos a mencionar de qué tratará la película de The Batman. En su segundo año luchando contra el crimen, Batman explora la corrupción existente en la ciudad de Gotham y el vínculo de esta con su propia familia. Además, entrará en conflicto con un asesino en serie conocido como el Acertijo.
But it's coming to tears unless there's like a unknown comet approaching Earth or something. But
well, you know, it's like what they said when we briefly shut down. I was told that this was, you know, when the pandemic, we were shooting during the pandemic, and suddenly it was force majeure. So it would have to be force majeure, some act of God, right?
Sure. So Batman itself has always been like very dark, but not necessarily Bruce Wayne, right? At least in the movies. So how interesting was for you to like create this new version of Bruce Wayne that is so like kind of gothic. He's very kind of dysfunctional, right? He's not like the typical playboy. And then to discuss it with Robert Pattinson and to develop it even more.
Sure. I mean, you know, what I really wanted to do, what I thought was exciting, was to revisit the character in his early years so that his character had room to evolve. And so this idea of a younger Batman who was still figuring out what it meant to be Batman, was acting in a way where he was not even fully aware of what was driving him. I mean, he'd like to think he's doing this to make the city better, but honestly, he's acting in a mode of vengeance because he's trying to make sense of his life. He's never going to get over what happened to him when he was 10 years old. And so it's got a very personal drive in it, probably more so than he's aware of, so that the movie's meant to kind of bring him along in an awakening, so that by the end he realizes he has to change. And as far as the Bruce Wayne part of it, I thought that there was an opportunity, because we'd seen the Playboy version, who drove the Maserati. I thought, well, you know, that makes total sense, but there's another kind of reaction that you could have, which would be like a member of a storied family like, you know, the Kennedys or like the royals, you know, the British royals, where like some tragedy happens and the weight of it all is too much. You want to withdraw from it. And I thought, well, why wouldn't he just as much, you know, want to become like Howard Hughes and hide from the media and just not to go out? You know, if that had happened to you and every time you walk down the street, people were like, Bruce Wayne, you'd probably stop going out so much. And the idea would be that people would start to see him as this kind of recluse. And so that seemed like an interesting way to go. I started thinking of him kind of like I was listening to Nirvana when I was writing, and I started thinking of him like a rock star. He's kind of like a recluse rock star. It made me think of, people have said, oh, like, you know, you've said he's like Kurt Cobain, and I didn't mean that Kurt Cobain is like Batman, but what I did mean is that I think Kurt Cobain had a relationship to fame where being famous was not, he loved music, but the idea of being famous for music was maybe a double-edged sword, and maybe wanted to kind of retreat for that. So he was kind of a recluse, and I thought that kind of rock edge was very appealing to me as a different way to go, and that made me think of Rod Pattinson, actually. And so when we met, I started writing the movie for him, actually, before I ever knew if he'd want to do it, and fortunately he did want to do it. And working with him was great because he's such an inventive, thoughtful, interesting guy, and he always comes at stuff from a very sort of non-traditional angle, something from a side you don't expect. And so we did develop it further, and trying to figure out like how this guy would be kind of in a kind of free fall. This is a guy who every time he goes out there, everyone he's fighting in his mind, he's really fighting the killers of his parents every night. So it's kind of like he's in this crazy sort of, you know, shadow state where he's not really aware. He's in this very instinctive state, and exploring that with Rob was great.
Espero que te haya gustado este video. Si es así, activa las notificaciones y no te olvides de seguirme para que no te pierdas ninguno de mis próximos videos. Yo soy Naughty Geek y nos vemos en un próximo video. Bye.